What is up, everybody? Purple and Gold podcast for Tuesday, March the 10th. LSU and Creighton tonight, 6:30 from Alex Box Stadium. Tigers trying to right the ship, and it's a new week, and try to flush this last week plus and see if they can't put their best foot forward as they get into SEC play this weekend on the road in Nashville. We will do a preview of the LSU Creighton game here in just a minute. I asked for some questions. I thought we'd do a little Q&A today, and I got some good ones on Facebook. And so I thought we'd start with the Q&A and begin there. Taylor Boudreau, great buddy of mine, first responder. Shout out to all first responders and everybody in that field. God bless you all. He asked a couple of questions. One was, when does LSU expect Chris Stanfield back? And Jay Johnson gave an update on that, and Chris Stanfield is swinging the bat now. That was the last hurdle he needed to clear. I would not be surprised if Chris Stanfield doesn't play in some form or fashion this weekend in Nashville. It would be interesting to see if he played tonight. I don't expect him tonight. I don't think they'll want him to have any setbacks. I think the plan always was to have him ready for SEC play, so hopefully Stanfield will get back this weekend. Taylor also asked, what do I think the lineup would be in SEC play? And so that kind of dovetails with the answer about Chris Stanfield. I don't think LSU will have a singular lineup. And I don't even think they'll have as regular a lineup as they had last year. Once they switched to Braswell at third base last year, the only real changes they ever made were between Pearson and Jake Brown against a left-handed pitcher. And of course, Kate Beatty would catch on Saturdays to give Luis Hernandez a break. I do expect when Stanfield comes back, obviously Stanfield, Curiel, Brown, I do expect Trent Caraway to start the vast majority of games at third base, Milam at short, York at first, Aaron Beatty at catcher. Probably they'll catch Cerna maybe once a weekend. I think the spots where you could see some different players would be at second base and DH. Obviously, if Seth Dardar turned this thing around and pulled up the nose, I think he would play the majority of games at second base. And then conceivably you could get into some sort of a Mason Braun, Braden Simpson platoon at DH, where Braun would probably be on the right side of the platoon. If Dardar sort of isn't able to pull up the nose, you could see Braden Simpson some there. You could see Jack Ruckert there, although I think it's more likely you'll see Jack Ruckert as a defensive replacement. I don't know how many games Jack Ruckert will actually start in SEC play. And I think, assuming that everyone stays healthy, I do think you'll see the playing time go down for guys like Daniel Harden, Tanner Reeves, John Pearson. Doesn't mean they won't ever make a start in SEC play, but I don't think it will be as sort of regular as it has been when Jay was sort of in his, I don't want to call it experimenting, I don't want to call it tinkering because he doesn't like those words, but I think when we were trying to find out maybe who was going to win these position battles. And then the last thing Taylor asked was about, what do I think LSU's chances are of doing well in the SEC? And look, I would just answer it this way. Obviously, LSU was well thought of in preseason polls. They were well thought of by all of the national media. Now look, we saw this last year. Virginia was preseason number 2. Texas A&M was preseason number 1. They both missed the NCAA tournament. There is precedent for a highly ranked, highly thought of college baseball team to completely flounder. I have too much faith in Jay Johnson and Nate Yeske. I have too much faith in this roster to think that they would completely and totally falter to the point where they would miss the SEC tournament. Do I think, based on the first 17 games, you have to temper some of your preseason expectations? Yes. I believe in my preseason prediction, I had LSU, I think, at 40-16 and 17-13 in the SEC. Well, obviously, if they went 17-13 in the SEC, they'd already be at 18 losses, and that's not counting all of the other midweek games they have. But if you told me right now LSU was going to go 17-13 in the SEC, I would take that all day, because based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks, 13-17 seems more reasonable. But what do I think the chances are of them being successful? I still think it's good. I think they can turn this thing around. Vanderbilt's going to be tough, but Vanderbilt has a lot of injuries, and Vanderbilt has floundered harder than LSU has in the non-conference here. So it's still an opportunity, if LSU can pitch well and play well this weekend, to maybe steal 2 out of 3 in Nashville and maybe get off on the right foot and get this thing turned around. Mike Brandstetter, Coach Mike, he had some Cubs questions. He wanted to know, how many wins do I think the Cubs will have this year? I think the Cubs are at least a 90-win team, maybe 92 or 93. He wanted to know who would be possible trade bait at the deadline. I don't think the Cubs will be sellers at the trade deadline. If they were underachieving, and if they did want to move someone at the trade deadline, Nico Horner is in the last year of his contract, and they're not going to re-sign Nico Horner, so more than likely he would be someone who they would consider trading. But again, I expect the Cubs to be adding at the trade deadline. And he asked me if I thought the Cubs could overtake the Brewers and win the NL Central. 100% yes. I think the Alex Bregman and Edward Cabrera additions are huge for the Cubs. The Brewers, of course, traded Freddie Peralta to the Mets. I think the Brewers have to take a little bit of a step back. They can't constantly trade away players and retool. I know it's their game. I know they're one of the ultimate mid-market teams, and this is what they do. And I'm sure they'll be in it all the way to the end, but I think they do take a little bit of a step back, and I do think the Cubs win the NL Central. Hunter Harrow asked, do you think we'll ever see LSU have a roster in football like the 2019 team had, and do I think it's possible under Lane Kiffin? So I will answer it this way. I think the 2019 LSU football team is the greatest college football team of all time. Anybody who knows me knows my affinity for Joe Burrow, for Justin Jefferson, for Jamar Chase, for Patrick Queen, for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't want to say it's impossible that you could ever have a team like that again, and I certainly think Lane Kiffin and Billy Glasscock's roster building is at an elite level for this day and age. But I think that's the difference, Hunter. My answer would be, it's a different day and age. It's rev share, it's NIL, it's transfer portal. I know Joe Burrow came out of the transfer portal, but that was sort of pre where everybody went in the transfer portal. So my short answer is, I don't think you'll ever see a roster quite like 2019 ever again, but I do believe in Lane Kiffin and Billy Glasscock's roster construction, and I believe in it this year. I mean, look, they spent $40 million on this roster, and I mean, if a couple of things break right, I think this roster could be elite. You need Sam Levitt to stay healthy. You need Jordan Seaton to be an all-world left tackle. You need a couple of edge rushers to hit. But it's not impossible to think that LSU couldn't be an elite roster this year, 10-2, 11-1 type team. Do I think, you look at Indiana this year, right? Indiana went undefeated, they won the national championship. I don't think anybody really believes Indiana is comparable to the 2019 LSU team. So my answer is, I don't know that you'll ever see a team like that again, but I do have a lot of faith in Lane Kiffin and Billy Glasscock's ability to put together a roster. And then Jimmy Anderson asked, is NIL negotiable every year? And the short answer to that is yes. Pretty much every guy and gal, basically in every sport, is pretty much on a one-year deal. Now, the NIL stuff may not be negotiable every year in the standpoint that when you give someone an NIL deal and it has to go through the clearinghouse, it may be a 4-year package, right? So like when Bryce Underwood got the big NIL deal from Michigan and he got, upwards of whatever he got, 10, 11, 12 million dollars, whatever whatever that was, that, say it was $12 million, that would have been $3 million a year for 4 years. So in the standpoint that, is it negotiable? Maybe not. Maybe not the actual year-to-year number might not be, but the particular NIL deals that an athlete could get could certainly be negotiable. So, for example, William Schmidt recently went on AFR with Matt Moscona. He was talking about having to put on weight, and he was talking about how he used Smoothie King to do it. And then Smoothie King came in and partnered with William Schmidt, and we assume gave him some sort of an NIL deal. Well, they may have given him a 1-year deal. They may have given him a 2-year deal. We don't know. But those kinds of deals are between the player and the company. So, in theory, those would be negotiable every year. If William Schmidt has a deal maybe with, or any LSU athlete has a deal with someone like Gordon McKernan, who's an LSU booster, and then they transfer out, I assume Gordon McKernan has things in place that he doesn't have to continue to honor that NIL deal. So the short-term answer is there are escalators, there are clauses, there are year-to-year things, but in general, the bigger NIL deals, probably the more expensive ones, probably are in totality on a 3 or 4 year basis, but they are on a year-by-year basis. I hope that sort of answered that question. And look, we're still in a new world of NIL, and there probably needs to be some uniformity and some guardrails, which is what the clearinghouse is aiming to do. So quick preview of Creighton. Creighton comes in 5-7. They do hit a little bit. They've got 4 guys in the lineup batting .298 or better. Ben North is an all-conference player, but they've been rough on the pitching. Team ERA well over 6. LSU needs to break out of their offensive funk tonight, and LSU needs to hit this team's pitching staff, and LSU needs to win this game. I think they will. We'll be back tomorrow to cover it. We'll be back tomorrow to review it, and we'll also be back to talk. We'll probably be in the afternoon again tomorrow after LSU plays Kentucky in the SEC men's basketball tournament at 11:30. Good luck to the Tigers tomorrow morning. And so we'll be back to recap both games tomorrow afternoon. Thanks, everybody, for sending in your questions. Please like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Please follow me on Twitter at RobG1124. As always, be good to one another, and always, 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 go Tigers.